This one involves the American Family Association, which is one of those right-wing Christian hate groups that's just vehemently anti-gay. The American Family Association is being sued by a former employee who held a position of power in the group. Why? For same-sex sexual misconduct and retaliatory behavior. And the details here get extremely wild. I'm going to leave this up here just so you can see what we are talking about. I want to share this, and I'll put this up here so you can see it. This is the lawsuit. It's from a guy named Robert Chambers. And Robert Chambers spent nearly 7 years from 2015 to 2022 working for the American Family Association. The AFA, by the way, it's the same group that oversees the One Mom at 1 Million Moms, which boycotts everything in sight. They sponsored a show hosted by a right-wing bigot named Brian Fisher. They launch boycotts against every company they think is too progressive. So this guy, Chambers, he was their vice president of policy and legislative affairs. He was executive vice president of AFA Action, which is their lobbying arm. And he was a member of AFA Action's board of directors. So he's not a random dude you can write off as a random employee. This is a guy in leadership position. This guy once appeared on a Christian show and blamed Satan for why so many people criticized anti-LGBTQ laws. And so this guy was in it for the long haul, right? But he's suing the organization and many of their leaders for ignoring his claims of sexual harassment, creating a hostile work environment, threatening to withhold his severance package until he agreed to keep his mouth shut, and more. So I'm going to go through some of those details here, but just to give you an idea, the AFA has a budget of roughly $28 million a year. They use that money to hurt LGBTQ people and marginalized communities. And just last year, ProPublica reported that AFA changed its IRS designation from a regular nonprofit, which does have to report how it spends its money and how much it takes in. They changed it from a nonprofit to a church, which means they don't have to disclose where their money is coming from and where it's going and how much they have at their disposal. So that's shady as hell. So here's some of what they said. Here's one of the allegations that Robert Chambers made. One allegation was against Rob Cook, their director of localization. According to the lawsuit, Chambers said Cook made repeated, escalating, sexually suggestive comments to him, including comments made while grabbing Chambers' face and ear. He called these, I'm going to show you this right here. He called these comments homoerotically charged, and you can read some of them right here. They include comments like, "I see you're really good with that wrist action. I wonder how you got to be so good at that." I don't even know what that's in reference to, what Chambers was doing, but also, ew. Then you got, "Now you don't want me to get a hold of you, do you? You'd really like that, wouldn't you? You'd like me to take you and get a hold of you." Honestly, this is very awkward flirting, but it's also totally inappropriate in the workplace. And this is from one guy working at the AFA to another guy working at the AFA. So that's messed up. If two gay men said that in the workplace and AFA found out about it, AFA would be calling for a boycott of the entire company. But when some dude working for the AFA makes these references to like masturbation, it's just locker room talk, apparently, right? So Robert Chambers, he reported this to his bosses. And the bosses said, "Wow, you're not the only guy who's complained about this other guy making these comments." But guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing ever came of those complaints. In fact, the guy who made those comments, according to Religion News Service, his LinkedIn profile still says he works at the AFA, but his Facebook page describes him as a former AFA member, and the AFA wouldn't confirm whether or not he was still working for them, but that's a little weird. But the point is, that guy faced no real consequences as far as we know, so that's messed up. Another thing that happened, in 2019, there's a blogger named David Carey Hart who writes about church-state separation and finances, and he pointed out how AFA Action, the lobbying arm of the AFA, they didn't file the right paperwork with the IRS for 2 years. He also pointed out that AFA lied on its tax returns because they said they had no related organizations, even though they had this lobbying arm, which is a related organization. So Robert Chambers saw that blog post, probably had a Google alert for this company, right? And he got worried that the AFA was doing something wrong, because they were. So he said he brought that up with AFA's leaders at the organization. He said, "Are we not transparent here? Because it seems like we lack transparency. Seems like we have accounting irregularities. And also the PO boxes for our companies are all the same, and we shouldn't be doing that." And what did the leader at AFA say at the time? According to, I want to share this here. According to Robert Chambers' lawsuit, look at this. The response he got: "I'm glad about their confusion. Smiley face emoji." He's referring to the liberal blogger who was a watchdog and maybe the IRS. The guy working at the AFA was very happy about their confusion. So that's messed up. And guess what? 2 months later, the IRS revoked the tax exempt status of the lobbying group, which confirmed they filed the wrong paperwork. I should say AFA Action is now re-registered and they're tax exempt again, but I'm just saying the blogger was right and Chambers was right to raise the concern. And Robert Chambers also says in the lawsuit he's concerned about possible embezzlement within the organization, and he asked AFA's leaders to do an audit of the lobbying arm to make sure donations to one weren't getting mixed up with donations for the other. He says those requests were ignored. So that's messed up. But here's the most messed up part of this lawsuit. It involves a baby. Are you ready for this? Oh my God. So it turns out there is one person who works at the organization. Her name is Lexi Wildman. I think it's Wildman. She's it's one family that runs this organization, and they all, people of the same last name, run this place. So anyway, Lexi one day had a dream about Robert Chambers and told him all about it. And I'm going to show you what Lexi Wildeman said. She said, according to Chambers, let's see if you could see this here. She told him that she dreamed that Chambers kissed her baby on the mouth. That did not happen. She dreamed that happened, but she shared that with him. And then she said Chambers was still a threat to the sexual innocence of children. She said she couldn't bring her kids to the office because she feared Chambers would harm them. And then she started telling everyone at work about her dream and why Robert Chambers could be a threat. Again, this was a dream. He says he didn't do anything. He didn't have any interaction with her baby. And by the way, that's actually a form of sexual harassment, saying this guy sexually harassed someone in my dream, and it's involving a baby and stuff. So that's a form of sexual harassment that he's like, it's just a lie. None of that happened. But it led to reputational damage on Chambers' part. So after all of this, he says, even though the company had a policy prohibiting sexual misconduct, and even though they had a policy saying whistleblowers wouldn't be punished, he was punished for speaking out. He said in September of 2022, he was fired after raising his concerns again about Cook, the guy who made all those weird flirty remarks to him, for the 10th time, he says. He complained about him, and he complained about the woman spreading the lie about the baby dream for the 4th time, and they fired him. And why was he dismissed? According to AFA leaders, it's because he didn't have respect for leadership. What did he do against the leaders? No one knows. He says they didn't elaborate, but they insisted that his issues with those other people were not the reasons he was being fired. He actually includes a very detailed transcript of his conversation with the AFA's leader. Check this out. The plaintiff is Robert Chambers here. Well, the timing is really interesting, Ed. After I bring up about being sexually harassed and then bringing up something that someone else told me that they were had dreams about me and their child. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call that I'm being terminated, but it doesn't have anything to do with that. The timing is really odd. And then this guy who's a leader at the AFA says, it may seem that way, Rob. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you besides the fact that we we just don't discuss these kinds of issues. It's just trails off. That's a conversation those two dudes had. The lawsuit also says that after Chambers was let go, AFA employees were told that he was fired because of a disagreement of philosophy, which suggests that Robert Chambers was like no longer a good Christian because they define Christian in a very narrow way. But there's no reason to think Robert Chambers had changed his views on anything. But like, they're basically saying, guys, don't interact with this dude because he's not a good Christian like the rest of you. So that's not only a lie, that's actually harming him in the process. It's a form of retaliation. And here's the last thing. He was owed severance after his firing, but he says the agreement, the severance agreement that he had to sign included a poison pill. He would only get the money he was owed if he basically promised never to talk shit about the AFA. And you could see this here. The group said he owed them a continual duty of loyalty. Here's the part of the severance agreement right there. You hereby agree that during the time you are employed by AFA and thereafter, you owe a continual duty of loyalty to AFA, which includes refraining from disparaging any part of our organization, including on social media. So don't talk about us in public. Don't trash us in public. That was like, what is this? You owe continual duty to us. That's messed up. So he had the choice. Does he want the money, which was a lot of money because he'd been working there for a while, or does he want the ability to speak out against what he sees is unfair and wrong? He chose not to take the money, and now he's suing them. The AFA, of course, denies all of this. They wrote a statement. They sent a statement to Religion News Service saying, since 1977, our ministry has continued to maintain the highest standards of morality and personal conduct for our staff and leadership. The claims made against our organization by a disgruntled former employee are unfounded, gross mischaracterizations of the facts. Like, is that really what this is all about? Because I would have a easier time believing that if AFA's definition of morality and personal conduct and the highest standards of morality, these are the people who once filed a brief urging the Supreme Court not to repeal anti-sodomy laws that punish gay men who have sex in the privacy of their own home. And it is really hard to claim Chambers is disgruntled when he regurgitated the party line for so long in public. And by the way, the AFA claims the facts are gross mischaracterizations, not lies. They're saying he exaggerated, not that he made things up, which the wording there suggests there's some underlying truth to what he's saying, which is interesting. And so I don't know what's going to happen. This will go to court. We'll see what happens to AFA. I just want to point out one other thing, because some of you, like me, you may be tempted to think good for Robert Chambers. That guy's a hero. Good for him for going after that. And I would warn you not to think that way. Chambers is not a hero here. He spent his career working for the AFA, the American Family Association. He worked to enshrine Christian nationalism into the law. The policies that he personally pushed for, they hurt women, they hurt gay people, they hurt trans people, they hurt refugees. He claimed a monumental piece of voting rights legislation would be the end of free and fair elections if Democrats passed it. He said if Democrats won the 2018 midterm elections, it would be a disaster because, quote, they would fight for abortion rights and Planned Parenthood funding, insist on open borders and amnesty, and demand liberal judges. All of which sounds great. He said Christians who support LGBTQ rights, even if they're personally opposed to same-sex marriage, were being unbiblical. He also condemned the head of the Republican National Committee because she forged an alliance with a group for gay Republicans. Like, none of that is an excuse. Like, I'm not saying he deserved to be harassed or mistreated at work. Of course he didn't. But it's just a reminder that the same people who insist Christianity is synonymous with goodness, they have no problem covering up bad behavior by those same Christians until it affects them personally. So, like, this guy, I hope he goes to court. I hope he gets everything he can from the AFA, but it doesn't mean he deserves any sympathy from us at all.